I am Erika Holst. I'm the curator of collections at the Springfield Art Association. And I have to let you know that I could tell it to you in about 5 slides. It would take about 5 minutes, but that wouldn't be any fun because this house has driven me crazy for the past 3.5 years. There have been so many puzzles, there have been so many ups and downs, so I'm going to take you on the entire emotional roller coaster so that when we finally get to the point where we learn how the house all fits together, you'll be as satisfied as I am. The house was built in 1833, but the big challenge is this doesn't look like an 1833 house. You walk right by it not realizing that it is in fact the oldest house in town. And that might have caught your ear when Mary Beth said this is the oldest house in town, because of course there are other old houses in town. We actually do have documented proof that the house dates to 1833. And this comes in the form of 2 land transactions. In one, the first owner of the house, Thomas Hohen, purchased the property in, 1832 for $2,800. In 1834, he sold off a portion of that property except his dwelling house. So there's no dwelling house there in 1832. There's a dwelling house there in 1834. Everyone says that the house was built in 1833. It seems like a pretty certain fact. Now there is the matter of the other oldest house in town, and you might have been wondering about that. The Isles house, as best I know, and maybe if there's volunteers, I know Judith is here, but as best I know, the Isles house dates to 1837, and I don't know if there's ever been any definitive proof that it is any earlier than that. And then coupled with that fact, it's been moved around a little bit. So Edwards Place is actually chronologically older, and it's still sitting right in the same place where it was built, which is why I feel comfortable saying that it is the oldest house in town. Putting aside the fact that Abraham Lincoln came here and the Edwardses were a very socially prominent family, the house is significant just for existing this long. 1830s is so old, and our challenge is to determine how much of this house dates back to 1833. 1833, to put that in context, this is before Abraham Lincoln shows up and makes his residence in Springfield. Springfield is just another dusty little town in 1833. It is clinging to the edge of the prairie. It's just making the leap from a frontier settlement into a more modern urban environment. It's before Springfield became the state capital. And keep in mind that when you find houses from the 1830s in Springfield, they normally look like this. They are archaeological sites buried in the ground. So to have an intact structure that dates all the way from 1833, still here, still functioning, pieces of it still able to be observed and used, it's amazing. It's really a resource, and it tells us so much about our past and the way that people's lives changed. So our challenge here is to figure out how much of this house is original and how much we can date to that early time. And so this is the oral tradition that we have that we're basing everything off of. Benjamin Edwards purchased from Dr. Thomas Hohen a 6-room brick house, which the doctor had built in 1833, set in a beautiful 14-acre grove of oaks, maples, and walnuts. The house was comprised of a parlor, dining room, kitchen, summer kitchen, porches, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. We have a preservation architect who helped us develop the restoration plan for Edwards Place. This is the layout that she came up with, and I will let her remain nameless because I wasn't thrilled with the evolution that she produced. I think she was off base a little bit. But she envisioned that this is the house as it looked in 1833. A sitting room and a kitchen. Now we call that room the dining room and the kitchen. Then she imagined a phase 2, a second phase of expansion, where you put on the parlor, the music room, the library, and the kitchen back there. And then she imagined in 1858 that the front of the house kind of gets squared off there, the children's parlor goes in the back, and so 1858 wasn't really a huge transformation. And she's basing a lot of this off of, this is a set of plans that were drawn in 1857 to expand Edwards Place. So if the Edwards family had had just a little bit more disposable income that year, this is the house that you'd be visiting today. Unfortunately, they took one look at this. They thought that this was more house than they wanted to invest in, and they scaled back their plans. And so the Edwards Place that you see today is kind of a scaled back version of the original dream here. This is the basement floor plan, and it's hard to tell, so I've enhanced the lines, but the shaded lines are what the architect had shaded in and said that these are the old walls, or the original walls. So we know that when the architect came out to draw the plans in 1857, this footprint was already there. And so this is kind of what informs this idea that there are three phases, that there's a really small early core, that before 1857 the house was expanded to look like that, and then by 1858 it became the Italianate square that we see today. So we'll start with the kitchen and see if we can prove that this is indeed an odd space, and this is what we used to call the small dining room. Today it's going to become our archaeology room. And there's a lot of evidence of antiquity in this space. So what we have here is hand-dried lath. So machine-made, machine-split lath came fairly early to this area by the maybe late 1830s, early 1840s. Before that, picture a guy with a tree trunk and a froe literally, splitting pieces of wood. So each one of these pieces of wood there, which are now in our basement, is, somebody's handwork. This is a very early feature. We also have this straight sawn log here. Looking closely at it, the saw marks go up and down. Again, this is an early technological way of doing things, and this involves, sometimes it can be two guys in a pit with a straight saw moving up and down and produces these very vertical lines in the wood. They developed circular saws in sawmills, again fairly early, by the 1840s, definitely in place by the 1850s. We have this really nice dressed limestone floor, which doesn't have to be 1830s, but also could be. And we've got this evidence of a fireplace here that suggests that it was the kitchen. So we're fairly convinced that the kitchen is an early space. Upstairs above, we've got more hand-dried lath here. This is where the fireplace used to be. The bricks used to stick out here. Someone had smashed through the bricks and flattened it out there. We've got evidence of, this is where a cabinet used to sit next to the fireplace that's been plastered over. And the floor here is these wonderful original oak beams, and then where the fireplace was taken out, it's been filled in with pine. So again, the kitchen, we're fairly confident is early, and the attached sitting room, which is now our dining room, also has evidence of being early. For example, we think that the fireplace that is now directly upstairs, pictured on top, was once in the dining room, and this is a very classically Greek Revival, very early type of fireplace. In 1857, they put in this very ornate Rococo thing, and we think it made sense that they just took the old mantle and put it right upstairs because it matters less if your bedrooms are fashionable. We've also got this amazing oak floor that's original to the 1830s and walnut trim. And in general, where we found pine, pine indicates a construction date of 1850s or later. Where we found walnut or oak, that has tended to be earlier. And what's neat is that this oak floor extends halfway into the sitting room in front. So you can see this really clear line here. This is pine, this is oak. And what you're looking at is right here, which means that this used to be the front of the house here, and eventually when they expanded the house, they knocked this out and moved it forward to right here. You can also see this line evident in the brick outside, and it's a little hard to tell in the photo, but when you leave, you'll see it very clearly where the old brick stops and the new brick starts. So we've got this as, yes, we can confirm that this is probably the early core of the house, but by the way, I neglected to mention that there is a basement only under the original portion, including the old summer kitchen, which is now usually referred to as the fourth parlor. Okay, so that tells us that the old summer kitchen, or the fourth parlor, is part of the original portion of the house. So now our drawing looks like this. And if we go to this area, the upstairs was pretty modern when we started all this process. It's now been stripped bare, and we'll handle that later in the talk. But if you go underneath, this sandstone foundation here is incredibly early, and Robert said that this is the foundation that he found when he was excavating the Isles store, which dates to the 1820s. It's just not a great building material. It's not something that people continue to use. And we've also got this big, huge support that indicates where a cooking fireplace used to be. So we're fairly confident that this summer kitchen is early too. And now we've got this as an original footprint of the house, and this just drove me crazy. Does it bother anyone else? It drives me crazy because, first of all, you've got a house that is essentially one room and two kitchens. You know, why do you have twice as many kitchens as living space? Also, this is a brick house for a well-to-do early doctor, and if you're going to take the time and trouble and expense to build in brick, wouldn't you give yourself a little more house than that? You've got the center hall here, and anyone who's been in our center hall knows that it's a wide space, and why would you have this big, wide hall attached to one room? It's like, you know, a third of your living space is hall. And also, this just doesn't look like any building I've ever seen. You know, if you picture an early building, the layout's just all wrong. Now, I would have loved if the building looked like this. In fact, I looked at the layout and said, aha, this must be what it is. Look how pretty that is. It's so symmetrical. There's a center hall, parlor, sitting room. This summer kitchen in the back is directly in line with the parlor, and it all makes sense. And I just would have loved if this is actually how it had been. But I went down here, I put on my grubby clothes, and I actually slithered as far into this crawl space underneath as I could and took a flashlight. And I was looking in this area here. And what I was looking for was evidence of a fireplace right here that would have paralleled there, or any evidence in the brick that indicated that, you know, the house had been expanded and had gone from one room to two rooms. And there was nothing. There was just no evidence there to support my theory. Turns out that this isn't accurate either when we're talking about the 1833 version of the house, because, and Robert Madger pointed this out, I've got to give him credit, that early sandstone foundation that we saw here also continues around here. And then when you look upstairs, this is our back porch. There's no seam in the wall. There's no vertical line. There's no indication that these are two different episodes. So that means that this back thing is one unit. It is one early unit. So now we've got an even weirder shape of the original house here. So right now, our theory is that this is phase one. This is the original portion of the house, which is, you know, one room, a kitchen. Then we thought that this back thing is some kind of outbuilding, maybe a laundry with a kitchen in back, maybe, you know, a carriage house, but it could have been any number of things. Then we thought that this became phase two, that they add on two parlors and a kitchen, and then phase three is the purple. So phase three is really a matter of enclosing the back porch and bringing this section forward. And that was our working theory for a while, but something new always comes up. We decided to test it out and take a little peek into the brick here. So when you're standing here, this would have been outside space in phase two. You would have been standing by the front door and looking at the side of the house. And so what you should see in the brick is evidence that the brick was exterior brick, and exterior brick tends to be smooth, more finished, often painted. And sure enough, it is. There's the exterior brick. So that part of the theory holds. Then we decided to look at this part, because if this is really that original 1833 core of the house, then this is an exterior brick wall here, and if you're looking right here, you should see a painted facade right here, right? So we actually put another hole. I didn't have a great picture of it, but when the baseboards came off, there's the little hole, there's the baseboards coming off. This is interior brick. This was never exterior. This was never meant to see the light of day. So now what we have is this as phase one, which I liked a whole lot better. You've got sitting room or dining room, maybe a couple parlors. You've got this going on in back, and this is just a big question mark. We have no idea how these two attach or what's going on there, or if they happened in two different phases. Remember, we're still thinking that the back is some kind of outbuilding, and the front two parlors are original, but they're sitting awfully close together, and that theory is starting to get uncomfortable. There's some good evidence that those parlors actually are original to the house and date back to the 1830s. Upstairs, there are these two fireplaces, and they've got Greek Revival trim that exactly matches the trim downstairs. And so again, our theory is that they took the older walnut Greek Revival mantels and popped them directly upstairs and replaced them with these nice marble Rococo Revival mantels when they redid the house in 1857. So getting back to our layout, we've got the black as phase 1. We still think we have a phase 2 on our hands, and phase 2 is the kitchen, and that's the kitchen that's in Edwards Place today. We thought that that was put on sometime in the 1840s. And then, as a matter of complete serendipity, a cache of documents showed up, and this belonged to a family in Springfield, and first they had called the Sangamon Valley Collection, and then Curtis Mann over there got in contact with me and said, oh, there's this man, he has old documents, he says they relate to the Edwards family. And let me tell you that as a curator, you get calls like this a lot, especially when it relates to, when I used to work for the Papers of Abraham Lincoln, someone called every Friday afternoon and said they had a copy of the Gettysburg Address. You know, when I was first working there, oh my gosh, it's the lost copy! But you know, by about the 5th or 6th or 8th time that happens, you think, okay, you know, so, okay, sure, they have documents that relate to the Edwards family, but you know, hope springs eternal, so I went out to check them out. And it turned out that they were contractors' documents from when the Edwards family remodeled their house in 1857. And it included this, which is so faded you can barely read it, but I've transcribed it here. This is a bill from 1857 for work done on Edwards Place. And the very first line item there is digging out foundation for kitchen at Mr. Edwards' house. So this is great. We know now that that kitchen came on in 1857. We also know that digging out that foundation earned some poor guy $1.50 for his time. So this means we have this mysterious phase 1 with that whatever's going on in back. And then we have phase 2 or phase 3. It means there's no phase 2. It means, as far as we knew, that the house went from this to this in 1857. So, you know, there went our phase 2. There's our kitchen, and this kitchen remained in place, as far as we knew, from 1833 until 1857 when they built their new kitchen. And what happened with that kitchen, how the kitchen evolved, here's the new kitchen in 1857. When they gave themselves a new kitchen right there, and gave themselves a new fireplace where they parked their new range. This was the old kitchen, right? There's a big cooking fireplace in it. And then when they redid it, this is no longer a kitchen, they put themselves this nice little, you know, heating stove, built a chimney and heating stove. They also built themselves this stair closet here. This used to be a set of stairs going up that now serves as our linen closet, and they created a set of stairs going down into the cellar. And that's what it looks like today. But we ran into a huge problem, in that starting to poke around in that closet, we found wallpaper. Really, really nice wallpaper. And this wallpaper is under the closet, which means the wallpaper was there, and then they built the closet on top of it. So this means that they either wallpapered their kitchen, or that this was not a kitchen in, you know, that time period. And Robert Measurement and I got into a pretty heated argument because he said, well, they're the Edwards family. They could have wallpapered their kitchen. And I said, no one would ever put that much money into a place that's smoky and dirty. Never would have wallpapered their kitchen. And, you know, I think we were in each other's faces and yelling at each other about it. I don't want to tell, I haven't told him yet, but I was looking at Olivia Conkling's diary in the Presidential Library and Museum. She's a woman writing a diary in the 1850s, and she made some kind of mention of papering a kitchen. I guess it did happen. I still don't like it, though. That wallpaper was very nice. It was probably French. It was machine-made. I just don't think you would go to the time and expense to put that beautiful stuff in a kitchen, which is the nastiest room in your house at that time period. So, Now we'll leave that mystery just hanging and let it irritate you the way it irritated me for a while. We'll turn our attention to the back of the house here, which is one of our biggest problems. What's it doing out there? What's the function of it? One thing that came to light that was a big surprise, we had, I don't know if you remember our trim being all nasty and dark. When it was scraped in order to be refinished, it turns out that this is walnut. Now remember that pine happens in the 1850s, walnut is early, possibly original or likely original.
Erika, why?
What?
Why wasn't there any ochre walnut used after 1850?
A matter of cost and convenience. The Illinois-Michigan Canal had opened up, as well as the railroads, and the lumber industries in northern Wisconsin and Michigan were getting going, so people were just importing tons and tons of pine, and you know, they're going to grain it anyway. So it seems to be the case in the Lincoln home too, that they just made the shift to pine in the 1850s. So we've got this space that, you know, we consider these two a unit, and this room here has walnut trim. So it's probably not an outbuilding, because you're not going to put fancy, nice walnut trim in your laundry. And then comes the biggest mystery of all. I got up in the attic. We were doing work in the ceiling right here, so I got up with a ladder, and I took 2 pieces of plywood, and I hopscotched across the attic right here, and took a look at this, and there's this arch. And it's right there. What is that arch doing there? Why is it there? The only thing I could say for sure is that this is an exterior feature. It's not structural, it's not load-bearing. This is an arch that was on an exterior wall. And so that means you have these 2 buildings that are right next to each other. This is the foundation, that's the back of the parlor, that's the front of the library. We were still thinking that the back one was an outbuilding of sorts, but they are sitting right next to each other, and they happened at different times. So is the arch the back of the parlors, or is it the front of the library? And why are these 2 buildings that happened in 2 different times sitting close to each other, and what's their function? And then we go to the children's playroom, and this was an interesting room. It turns out that that wall, you may recall that there being a giant bookcase there. This was a false wall that was built out in the probably 1920s when the Art Association used Edwards Place as gallery space. And this room here was a special gallery. They called it the DeWolf Memorial Gallery. And we think they built out the walls to kind of support the heavy artwork that they were displaying in there. And what they did was they just built out 6 inches and completely covered up the trim that was there. So in that room we thought we'd have to refabricate trim to match the rest of the house. It turns out that the original trim was there the whole time. But that back room there has pine trim. The front one has walnut trim. So this means that this building is one unit. It was built at the same time. One side of it was finished formally, the back side of it was not finished formally, and the pine was added in 1857 when they redid the house. This is the back wall here. It's kind of neat because there's a lot going on. There's evidence of a fireplace, and we saw the support in the basement. And we had always thought, oh, the Art Association took out the fireplace when they took over the house because they wanted to let the north light in. Well, this kind of sequence of events told us that the fireplace was long gone before the Art Association ever set foot here. There was a fireplace there, and then at some point, probably 1857, they put in trim here. The fireplace goes away, the trim goes in, and they also give themselves a door right here to the outside. And then at some point, the door gets bricked up too. This is what we have so far as the original 1833 floor plan of the house. We're confident about the kitchen, the sitting rooms, the parlors. Then we've got this mysterious arch and this one building in the back that has 2 different levels of finishes. So I'm going to, and this is good because this is what the architect saw in 1857. So we've matched that up. And what it tells us is that what he saw was likely all original to 1833. But we've still got these huge problems hanging out there. One of them is wallpaper in the kitchen. This is a big, big problem. Another problem is that we have this one unit of building, one with early walnut trim, one with late pine trim. Then we've got this problem of the arch connecting these two buildings. And then Robert Mazerum is really the one who had the Eureka moment. He put it all together, and this is where it happened, right down here in the basement. And the answer to all the problems is that there is no sandstone foundation right here. And that means that this is a U, and we were going under the assumption that this was a box. You know, here's one box sitting here, here's one box sitting here. At some point, someone messed with them and joined them together. This was never a box. This is the original portion of the house, and then someone built an addition right here. So this is a very early addition. And based on the fact that the Edwards family remembers that they bought a 6-room house with a summer kitchen, based on the fact that the foundation is limestone, we later found hand-ryed lath in there. We're fairly confident that that addition happened during the Hohen's tenure, which was 1833 to 1843. And in our minds, we had collapsed that time. You know, he built the house, Edwards family moved in, they start to tinker with it. We just completely overlooked the fact that the original owner had lived there for 10 years and had every right to improve or enlarge his house as well. So this is the evolution of the house. We're finally here. After all this pain and suffering and dead ends and collapsed theories, this is the way it happened. This was the house in 1833, and this is so pretty. This is just nice. It's not quite symmetrical, but you've got one room, center hall, 2 rooms there, back porch, front porch. It's essentially a square. I mean, you just see how nice and tight that is. And then at some point, Cohen puts on, we know this was a summer kitchen, and so our best guess is that this is a dining room. It just makes the most sense that it would be a formal space next to his kitchen there. And as it turns out, we can date it with some degree of accuracy. We'll never know 100%, but it turns out that Mr. Hohen gave a testimonial for Grover's Improved Patent Cooking Stove. It was dated October 1st, 1836. And Grover is from Ohio, but he said, should any of our citizens have doubts of its utility, I would refer them to Dr. Thomas Hohen of this place, who has had one of the above stoves in use for several weeks past, which means he installed his stove in the summer of 1836. And installing a new stove seems to point to the fact that maybe you've got a new kitchen that you're going to put your stove in. This also is very nice because this is right before the Panic of 1837, and that had devastating financial consequences for the country. It basically dried up people's credit and lasted for several years. So I like that he built himself a building while cash was still flowing before the panic hit. So this is the house that the Edwards family built in 1840, or bought in 1843. They paid $4,000 for it. Now, by contrast, Abraham Lincoln bought his house the following year for $1,500. And I always wondered if the Edwardses bought just a one house, you know, kitchen, parlor house, why their house was more than twice as much as the Lincoln's house. And the answer is because they didn't buy a one-room house with a kitchen. They bought this, a very substantial brick house. And this makes sense for the Edwards. Benjamin Edwards was the son of the Illinois governor. He was moving in with his wife and infant daughter. They had status that they wanted to maintain, and this is the kind of house that frankly befit their status. This would have given them plenty of time. And also, since we know that the Edwards family did their major remodel in 1857, it always, you know, taxed my ability to understand how the Edwards family could have lived in one room or, you know, even a couple rooms for up to a decade before they added on to their house. But this is a house where they would have had room to hang out for another 10 or 15 years or so before they decided to enlarge it. And then what we think happens is at some point between when the Edwards family move in 1843 and when they remodel in 1857, this stops being their kitchen. This is pretty close to their house. They've got this nice thing in back. It's to the north. The heat would have kind of blown away with the wind. We think that this stops being a kitchen. This stops being the summer kitchen. This is just their kitchen. That's it, you know, just the kitchen. And this becomes a livable space, which they then wallpaper. And the style of the wallpaper is perfect for that time period. This also fits nicely because we've got this wonderful archaeological collection. These are all things that were recovered on site from Edwards Place. And what these things have in common is A, they're all kitchen items, and B, they're all remarkably intact, so much so that Robert wondered if they were thrown into the privy intact or nearly so. And what that says to me is you're closing out one kitchen, you're cleaning out, you know, dump all the things you don't need anymore, and now you're moving to your other kitchen in the back here. And so, in conclusion, we have this in 1858. And this is, or 1857. This is the house that they enlarged. So to take you through it, Bill Cook did this artist rendition for us. And so this is, as best we can guess, what the house looked like in 1833 when it was first built. Of course, all we're really certain about is the floor print. So, you know, this could have been 6 feet tall and painted in polka dots for all we know. But this seems to make sense in 1833.
Was the orange a glass window?
That's still a little bit up in, we don't know exactly what it was there for. That's the best guess I have now is that, yeah, it was some kind of fan light at the back of the house. Definitely wasn't a door to the barn that we were thinking it might have been now, so we've ruled that out. So 1833. This is the house in 1836 because all they've done is add on towards the back of the house a nice discreet kitchen and dining room here. This is the house in 1857. And so this is what we've struggled this far and gone on this journey to determine is that this is the house as it looked in 1836. It's not quite the original construction, but it's still the way it looked a year before the Isles house was built. And it's huge. There's so much of this house here. You know, we started out thinking that there was just maybe 1 or 2 rooms that dated from this early period, and this is the bulk of the house. Really, all they did when they enclosed it was enclose this, and build on a kitchen. But everything you see here, that means the walnut trim in here, the floors in here, everything is 1830s. So again, I wind up with the idea that this house is significant not just because of who lived here and who visited here, but just by virtue of the fact that it exists and how it evolved.